The sound traveled down the narrow aisle like thunder trapped in a tin can. Every head turned. Gasps, the rustle of seatbelts, the faint buzz of a phone camera clicking on. For a moment, even the engines seemed to hold their breath. Row 14. A flight attendant stood frozen, her name tag catching the cabin light. Claire, her hand still half raised, trembling, and in front of her, calm as still water, stood a man in a navy jacket. Marcus Dean. A red mark began to form on his cheek, but his expression didn't change. Not anger, not shock, just silence. Passengers exchanged glances. Someone whispered, "Did she just?" before stopping themselves. Another started recording. Claire's voice cracked before she could form a sentence. "Sir, But Marcus didn't answer. He reached slowly into his jacket. The cabin tensed. For half a heartbeat, nobody knew what he was doing. Then, out came a small black wallet. He opened it, revealing a gold badge glinting under the reading lights. "Ma'am," he said quietly, his tone steady, controlled. "It concerns me, because I'm the one responsible for keeping this flight safe." The words didn't rise above a whisper, yet they hit harder than any shout. Claire's eyes widened. The passengers gasped again. The man she had just slapped wasn't just another traveler, he was a Federal Air Marshal. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was heavy. The kind of silence that wraps around guilt and fear, that makes even the air feel denser. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." Another said, "She's done." The captain's voice soon crackled over the intercom, calm, professional, but beneath it was tension. "Ladies and gentlemen, we ask everyone to remain seated. We're handling a situation." Claire stepped back, her throat tightening. I didn't know," she whispered. Marcus didn't respond. He simply held her gaze for a moment, then slowly turned and took his seat again, not out of submission, but out of restraint. Power, quiet, absolute, without a single word more. It had started long before the slap. Midway through Flight 762, from Los Angeles to New York, an argument had been brewing like a storm cloud waiting to burst. A passenger in seat 14B, an older man in a gray business suit, had been grumbling since takeoff. He had demanded to switch seats because the person beside him took too much armrest space. Claire, exhausted from a day of delays and short tempers, tried to keep the peace. "Sir, please," she said, her voice brittle but polite. "We're fully booked. I can't move you right now." But the man didn't stop. His voice grew louder, his tone sharper. "You're not listening. I paid for comfort, and this isn't comfort." Eyes turned. Claire forced a smile. "I understand, but then do something about it," he snapped. That was when Marcus noticed. He'd been sitting quietly 3 rows back, reading a worn paperback, his badge and weapon tucked deep beneath his jacket. He wasn't supposed to stand out. His job was to watch, to observe, to intervene only when absolutely necessary. But the tension in that aisle wasn't just irritation, it was escalation. And escalation, on a plane, is a risk. Marcus put down his book and rose, calm, controlled, every motion deliberate. He stepped into the aisle, his voice measured. "Ma'am," he said to Claire, "maybe let's take a breath. He's frustrated, but this can be resolved." Claire turned to him, already stretched thin by hours of turbulence, both in the air and among passengers. Her patience was gone. "Sir," she said, "please sit down. This doesn't concern you." Marcus stayed calm. "It does if it threatens safety on board." Those words, meant to diffuse, instead lit a fuse. Claire felt something break inside. Weeks of double shifts, rude passengers, pressure to smile through exhaustion. All of it boiled up in that moment. She turned sharply, her voice rising. "Don't tell me how to do my job." And then, before she even realized her hand was moving, came the sound that silenced the entire cabin. In that single moment, every unspoken line was crossed. But here's the thing about power, it's not about who shouts the loudest, it's about who stays calm when everyone else loses control. Marcus didn't yell. Did it move? Did it even touch the red mark on his cheek? Instead, he reached for that badge, the symbol of his quiet authority, and let it speak for him. When Claire saw it, her expression broke like glass under pressure. Her hand fell, her eyes filled with disbelief. I didn't know," she stammered again. "I know," he said softly. "That's why I'm not reacting." The rest of the flight sat in stunned silence. Some passengers watched through phones, others couldn't look at all. Marcus returned to his seat, the hum of the engine slowly swallowing the chaos. Claire stumbled toward the galley, her breath uneven. Inside, she leaned against the counter, heart pounding, the weight of what she'd done pressed down like gravity itself. Outside, Marcus sat motionless, looking out the window. City lights far below shimmered like scattered stars. He wasn't angry, He was disappointed, not just in her, but in the fragility of control, the way emotion can turn authority into recklessness in a single instant. He'd seen it before, in arguments that turned violent, in officers who forgot restraint, but rarely had it come from someone just trying to do their job. Still, wrong was wrong, and she had crossed a line. No uniform excuses. As the plane continued east, the passengers whispered among themselves. "He's an air marshal," someone said. "She had a federal officer," another voice replied. "She's going to lose everything." But Marcus didn't want to think about punishment. His focus was safety. If this turned into a spectacle, it could spark panic, so he stayed still, controlled, silent. When the captain later came to check on him, Marcus said quietly, "No need to divert. Let's finish the flight peacefully." The captain nodded, gratitude and unease mixing in his eyes. "Understood, sir." As for Claire, she spent the rest of the flight working silently, eyes down, face pale. Every step down the aisle felt heavier than the last. She could feel the stares, hear the murmurs. The air itself seemed to judge her, and somewhere in that cabin, the lesson was already forming, though no one could see it yet. Because sometimes, the moment justice begins, doesn't look like justice at all. It looks like silence, restraint, dignity under fire. I spent days crafting this story for you. If you enjoy stories where justice finds its way, please subscribe. It truly helps me keep telling them for you. The slap had long since faded, but its echo lingered in every corner of Flight 762. Each row had its own whisper, each face its own judgment. Claire kept working, but her hands trembled. Every time she reached for a tray or poured a drink, she felt eyes on her, quiet, disapproving, relentless. The uniform she once wore proudly now felt like armor made of glass. One wrong move, and it could all shatter again. Marcus sat still in his seat, staring out a window, his reflection ghosted against the dark clouds outside. His cheek was still faintly red, but his calm was unbroken. Passengers looked at him like he was made of stone, unshakable, unreadable. But inside, Marcus was processing, not anger, not pride, just disappointment. He had seen moments like this before, where emotion overpowered duty, but this time, it wasn't a stranger's life at risk. It was something deeper, the trust between those sworn to keep people safe. He thought about the other passengers. The little boy too rose up, wide-eyed, clutching his mother's hand. The elderly woman in 17C whispering prayers under her breath. The young couple recording everything on their phones. Marcus knew that by the time they landed, this story wouldn't belong to him or to Claire. It would belong to the internet. And the internet doesn't forgive. Up in the galley, Claire's supervisor, Janet, cornered her quietly. "Claire," she whispered harshly, "what happened?" Claire swallowed hard. It was a misunderstanding. He stood up, interfered, and Janet cut her off. "He's a Federal Air Marshal. You struck a federal officer in uniform, on duty. That's not a misunderstanding." The color drained from Claire's face. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Janet's tone softened, but only slightly. "You're exhausted. We all are. But this will have consequences." Claire turned away, gripping the metal counter for balance. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just snapped." "Intent doesn't erase impact," Janet said quietly. "You need to stay calm. When we land, authorities will meet the plane." Claire nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "Is he going to press charges?" Janet sighed. "I don't know, but if he does, it's out of our hands." Down the aisle, a few passengers whispered among themselves. "Did you see it? She hired him for no reason. She'll lose her job." "Well, she deserves it. You can't just hit people." The judgment was swift, merciless, but a woman in seat 12D, a social worker by profession, frowned and muttered under her breath, "People make mistakes. She's human." Still, the tide of public opinion in that flying metal tube had already turned. Marcus heard pieces of those conversations. He didn't react, but his jaw tightened. He wasn't angry at them, nor at Claire. He was angry at what moments like this did to people, how they erased humanity in exchange for spectacle. He pulled out a small notebook, the kind he used for incident logs, and began writing. Flight 762, incident at 14B. No further escalation, resolved without disruption. He didn't add slap. He didn't add humiliation. Just facts. Facts were his refuge. Emotion clouded justice. Facts restored it. Hours later, as the plane began its descent toward New York, the tension still hadn't lifted. Claire made one last round through the cabin, avoiding Marcus's row entirely. But as she passed, she could feel his presence, calm, unmoved, unthreatened. She wanted to say something, anything, but guilt strangled her voice before words could form. When the wheels finally touched the runway, the cabin erupted in the usual symphony of sighs, seatbelts clicking, phones powering on, but beneath that normalcy, an unspoken awareness lingered. Something extraordinary had just happened. At the gate, two uniformed DSA agents waited beside the terminal door. Their eyes immediately found Marcus. One of them approached with a nod of respect. "Marshal Dean, Captain briefed us. You okay?" Marcus nodded. "I'm fine. Keep it discreet." The agent's eyes flicked toward Claire, who stood pale and stiff near the galley. "Understood. We'll take her statement quietly." Marcus turned to the captain. "Please ensure the passengers exit normally. No drama." The captain gave a tight nod. "You have my word." Passengers disembarked with quiet tension, some stealing glances at Marcus, others at Claire. A few whispered into their phones, already sharing their version of events. Claire stood rooted as Marcus approached her. Every nerve in her body screamed to look away, but she didn't. She couldn't. When he stopped in front of her, the silence was unbearable. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "I lost control. I didn't mean." Marcus held up a hand. "Not here." Her eyes filled with tears. "Please, I didn't even know who you were. I'm not here to make an example of you," he said quietly, "but you need to understand, what you did could have turned this flight into chaos. You're supposed to be part of the calm, not the storm." Claire nodded, tears spilling down. "I know, I was tired, angry. It just happened." Marcus studied her face for a long moment, then said, "Tiredness doesn't erase accountability, but it also doesn't erase humanity." And with that, he turned and walked down the jet bridge, leaving her standing in silence as the agents approached. Claire sat at a metal table under harsh fluorescent light. Across from her, an investigator flipped through her report. "So," he said, without looking up, "you admit you struck a federal officer in the line of duty?" Claire's throat tightened. "Yes, but I didn't know." He set the folder down, eyes cold but not cruel. "That's not an excuse, Miss Turner. You're trained to maintain composure. Your job is passenger safety." "I know," she whispered. "I know." He leaned back, sighing. "The marshal chose not to press charges. Frankly, that's a miracle. But the FAA and your airline will still investigate. Expect suspension pending review." Her eyes widened. "Suspension, paid, for now, but it could become termination depending on findings." She felt her chest tighten. "I've worked for this airline for 8 years. Then you should know better," he said simply, closing the file. The door opened. Marcus stepped in, quiet as ever. The investigator nodded. "Marshal Dean." Marcus approached the table. Claire couldn't look up. He placed a copy of his report in front of the investigator. "That's my statement." The investigator scanned it, eyebrows lifting slightly. "You omitted details." "I included what mattered," Marcus replied. "The incident was contained. No passengers harmed. No need to escalate further." The investigator glanced at Claire, then back to him. "So you're not pressing charges?" Marcus shook his head. "Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about balance." Claire finally looked up, her lips trembling. "Why?" Marcus's gaze softened. "Because people don't learn from fear, they learn from accountability. You'll face yours without me adding weight to it." He turned to leave. Claire whispered after him, "Thank you." He paused at the door. "Don't thank me. Just do better." And then he was gone. Later that night, alone in her hotel room, Claire sat by the window overlooking the runway lights. Every flash of a departing plane reminded her of what she'd almost lost: her career, her reputation, her peace. She opened her phone. Dozens of messages lit up from coworkers, friends, even strangers. Some defended her, others condemned her. The videos had already started spreading online. The caption read, "Flight attendant slaps passenger, then realizes he's a federal officer." Millions of views in hours. And under every comment thread, debate, outrage, mockery. She closed the phone, buried her face in her hands, and whispered, "What have I done?" Injustice doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes, it comes from exhaustion, from losing yourself in a moment of weakness. But weakness has a cost, and the world rarely forgets. If you were in Claire's shoes, what would you have done? Would you have defended yourself, or stayed silent and let the world judge? Tell me in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. The story broke before the sun rose. By morning, everyone had seen the video. News anchors, talk shows, online forums, each played the same 10-second clip on repeat. A slap, a stunned silence, and a badge glinting beneath cabin lights. The headline was everywhere. Flight attendant assaults Federal Air Marshal during midair dispute. But as the story spread, something strange happened. The truth began to bend. Some posts claimed Marcus had provoked the flight attendant. Others twisted his calm demeanor into arrogance. Videos were edited, captions added, opinions shouted louder than facts. What had begun as a moment of injustice had become something far more dangerous, a narrative war. In a small federal office in New York, Marcus sat across from his superior, Deputy Director Lawson. The man's face was stern, his voice low and deliberate. "Marcus," Lawson said, sliding a tablet across the table. "You've seen this." Marcus nodded. "Yes, sir." Lawson exhaled. "You handle yourself with restraint. I'll give you that. But the public doesn't care about restraint. They care about stories. And right now, the story's chaos." Marcus leaned back. "I didn't leak it. I know that," Lawson said. "But your name's out there now. People are taking sides, and every side wants something different." Marcus glanced at the screen, comment scrolling endlessly. Some hailed him as a hero of discipline. Others accused him of racial bias, of flexing authority. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd done nothing but stay calm, and somehow, he'd become both villain and saint. Lawson continued, "Internal Affairs will do a review. Standard procedure. But I'll be honest with you, HQ doesn't like attention. They'll want this buried fast." Marcus met his gaze. "And the flight attendant? She's been suspended. There's an internal hearing next week. You'll probably be called to testify." Marcus nodded slowly. "Understood." Lawson paused. "Look, Marcus, you've served 14 years without incident. Don't let this one turn into a crusade. Sometimes, the right thing gets twisted when too many people are watching." Marcus said nothing, but in his chest, something began to stir, that quiet burn that comes when justice starts to feel unfinished. Across town, Claire sat in her airline's disciplinary review office. Her hair was tied back, her uniform replaced by plain clothes. She looked smaller somehow, as if part of her had deflated. A row of executives sat across from her, flanked by HR officers and a company attorney. One woman read from a file. "Miss Turner, this incident has caused significant reputational damage. Over 5 million views in less than 24 hours. We've received hundreds of complaints, threats, and refund requests." Claire's eyes filled. "I know, I've seen it." The attorney leaned forward. "Do you understand the seriousness of assaulting a federal officer?" "I do," Claire said softly, "and I'm sorry. I've said it 100 times. I lost control. It won't happen again." Another executive sighed. "Intent isn't the issue. Optics are. We're under pressure to act, so I'm fired," she whispered. There was silence. Then the HR officer said gently, "We're placing you on indefinite suspension, with mandatory retraining, pending FAA clearance." Claire's shoulders sagged, a mix of relief and despair washed over her. She wasn't fired, yet, but her name, her face, her career, were already public property. She gathered her things slowly, eyes down. As she left the room, she caught her reflection in a glass wall. The woman looking back didn't seem like her anymore. The city lights outside his window flickered through the blinds. His phone buzzed again. Another call from a journalist, another message request from someone he didn't know. He ignored them all. He poured himself a glass of water and sat at the edge of his bed, staring at nothing. The slap itself didn't bother him anymore. It was the noise after it, the noise that twisted truth until it was unrecognizable. He'd been trained to control chaos in emergencies. But this was chaos of another kind. Social chaos, public chaos. He opened his laptop. The video played again, looping endlessly. He noticed the comments beneath it. "She deserves to be fired." He was power tripping. "This is why no one trusts authority." He handled it with class. She should have known better. The comments fought each other like wild dogs, and somewhere in the middle, the real story, the quiet truth, was buried. Marcus closed the laptop. "Balance," he whispered to himself. "That's all that matters." The next morning, a knock at his door. It was Lawson again, this time with a folder. "HQ wants a formal statement," Lawson said, "but they also want this gun." Marcus frowned. "Gone. Sealed. No media, no interviews, no follow-up. Just done." Marcus opened the folder, reading the prepared summary. It was sanitized, clinical, a version of the event that barely resembled what actually happened. He looked up. "You want me to sign this?" Lawson's jaw tightened. "It protects you. It protects the agency. It's how we keep control." Marcus let out a long breath. "Control," he repeated quietly. "That's what started this." Lawson sighed. "You did nothing wrong, Marcus, but you can't fix people's perception. The world doesn't reward quiet justice, it rewards noise." Marcus stared at the paper a long time, then he slid it back across the desk. "I'm not signing a lie. Lawson's voice hardened. Then you're making this harder than it needs to be. Marcus stood. Truth usually is. Outside the office, Marcus pulled out his phone. A message blinked on the screen, from an unknown number. Mr. Dean, this is Karen Lee with the Daily Ledger. We'd like to hear your side before we publish tomorrow's feature. He hesitated. Every instinct as an officer told him to stay quiet, but the part of him that still believed in balance, in fairness, burned for the truth to be heard. He typed a reply, then stopped. He thought of Lawson's warning. Sometimes the right thing gets twisted when too many people are watching. He locked the phone and slid it back into his pocket. Not yet. She scrolled endlessly through comments online, her fingers trembling. Every insult hit harder than the one before. Unstable, unfit, disgrace. But then, buried deep among the hate, one comment caught her eye. She made a mistake. Don't crucify her. We've all snapped once in our lives. Her eyes blurred with tears. She screenshotted it, as if saving proof that not everyone had turned against her. In that small moment, she realized something. Maybe redemption wasn't about what people said online. Maybe it started with what she chose to do next. Meanwhile, Marcus couldn't sleep. He walked to his window, watching the city lights flicker like restless thoughts. He remembered his father's words he hadn't thought about in years. Son, his father once said, power isn't what you show, it's what you choose not to use. Marcus closed his eyes. He knew what he had to do, but timing was everything. The truth had power, but only if revealed at the right moment. The world moved fast, faster than truth could catch up. 3 days after the video went viral, Flight 762 had become a headline, a meme, a debate. But Marcus Dean wasn't the kind of man who chased headlines. He waited, watched, listened, because justice, he knew, wasn't about reacting. It was about timing. At the Daily Ledger, journalist Karen Lee sat at her desk, a half-empty coffee cup beside her and a dozen tabs open on her screen. Each headline told a different story, hero or hypocrite. Inside the Flight 762 scandal, Air Marshal faces scrutiny after viral confrontation. Flight attendant's career destroyed by one mistake. Karen frowned. Something about it didn't sit right. The footage was short, too short. The angles inconsistent. The audio distorted. She leaned toward her editor. This clip doesn't tell the full story, she said. The editor shrugged. Doesn't matter. People already made up their minds. Karen tapped her pen against the desk. Then maybe they made them up too soon. That same morning, Marcus received an official notice. Mandatory internal affairs hearing scheduled for Friday, 10 a.m. He folded the paper neatly and set it on the table. He'd faced inquiries before, shootings, arrests, incidents far worse than this. But this one was different. This time, it wasn't just his record at stake, it was his integrity. The media had turned him into a symbol, and symbols can't defend themselves. Later that day, his phone buzzed again. It was a new message from Karen Lee. Mr. Dean, please hear me out. I don't think the story's fair to either of you. I've reviewed the footage frame by frame. Something's off. If you're willing, meet me. No cameras, just the truth. Marcus read it twice. Then he typed one line. Where? Karen sat waiting, laptop open, voice recorder on the table. Marcus arrived, punctual, composed as always. Mr. Dean, she said, standing to greet him. Thank you for coming. Let's keep it simple, he said, sitting across from her. You want the truth? Ask, she nodded. What really happened on that plane? He thought for a long moment before answering. I saw a passenger getting angry. The attendant was trying to calm him down, but it was escalating. I intervened. She told me to sit. I explained that safety was my responsibility. And then, she hit me. Karen studied his expression. And you didn't retaliate. He shook his head. Would that have made it better? No, she said softly. But it would have made sense to most people. Marcus leaned forward. The world's obsessed with reaction. But power isn't proven through violence, it's proven through restraint. Karen nodded slowly, typing notes. Do you know what she's going through now? Marcus hesitated. I can imagine. She's been suspended. Threats online. People calling her every name in the book. I don't want that for her, Marcus said. She made a mistake. That doesn't make her evil. Karen looked at him curiously. Then why not speak publicly? Clear your name. Clear hers. Marcus's voice was low but steady. Because truth spoken too early is drowned by noise. Let them argue. When they're tired of shouting, then they'll listen. Karen smiled faintly. That's poetic. He half smiled. It's strategic. Meanwhile, at home, Claire sat in front of her laptop, drafting an apology she didn't know how to begin. Each sentence started strong, then faltered. To the passengers of Flight 762, delete. To the public who saw me at my worst, delete. To the man I wronged, pause. She stared at the blinking cursor. Her throat tightened. Finally, she typed, to Marshal Marcus Dean, I can't take back what I did, but I can say I was wrong. I forgot what it means to serve, not just passengers, but people. I let exhaustion become anger, and anger become harm. I'm sorry. She read it 3 times, then clicked post. Within minutes, it spread across platforms. The comments flooded in, some cruel, some forgiving, but all watching. And somewhere across the city, Marcus saw it too. He stared at the message for a long time, then he smiled faintly, not because it cleared her, but because it showed courage. Forgiveness, he thought, always starts with truth. Marcus received another message from Karen. This time, it contained a video attachment. He opened it. It was footage from another passenger, one that hadn't gone viral. The angle was wider, unedited. He watched closely. In this version, he could see the full context, the irate passenger, the shouting, the exhaustion on Claire's face, and most importantly, it showed the moment before the slap, the moment where Marcus gently stepped forward, palms open, tone calm, words measured. The world had seen the slap, but this video showed the humanity that led up to it, and the grace that followed. Marcus leaned back slowly, exhaling. There it was, truth, unpolished and real. The hearing room was cold, sterile, painted in government beige. A long table, 3 officers, 2 lawyers, 1 man in the center, Marcus Dean. Lawson was there too, silent at the end of the room. The lead officer cleared his throat. Marshal Dean, we've reviewed the reports. Before we close this hearing, is there anything you wish to add for the record? Marcus reached into his briefcase, pulled out a tablet, and set it on the table. Yes, you should see this. He played the passenger's full video. For 2 minutes, no one spoke. The room was filled only with the sound of cabin chatter, Claire's escalating tension, Marcus's calm voice, and then, finally, the slap. When the video ended, Marcus said quietly, this is the truth, not the edited story, not the viral one. The lead officer leaned back, nodding slowly. We'll add this to the file. Lawson looked at him, a subtle nod of respect in his eyes. As Marcus stepped out, the media swarmed. Marshal Dean, is it true you dropped the charges? Do you think she should be fired? Are you angry at how the public treated you? Marcus stopped at the top of the steps, calm under the storm of microphones. He spoke clearly, his voice steady enough to cut through the noise. I'm not angry. I'm not here to ruin anyone's life. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about balance. And sometimes, balance means letting go. For a moment, even the reporters fell silent. He turned and walked away, leaving his words to echo louder than any headline could. That evening, Claire watched the clip of his statement. Her breath hitched. The man she'd humiliated in front of hundreds had chosen dignity over vengeance. She whispered, he didn't have to, but he did, and for the first time since that day, she felt something like peace. Airports have a strange kind of silence before dawn, not quiet, but suspended, the world between arrival and departure. That's where Marcus found himself one early morning, standing in Terminal C at JFK. He wasn't scheduled to fly. He was there because of a message, one he hadn't expected. Marshal Dean, this is Janet from Horizon Air. Claire Turner asked to speak with you, privately. She said it's important. He hesitated when he first read it. Part of him thought it was unnecessary. Everything had already been said, done, resolved. But another part, the part that still believed in closure, told him to go. Claire was waiting near Gate 42, where no flights would depart for another hour. She stood by the window, looking out at the empty runway. The early sunlight painted the floor in gold streaks. When she turned and saw him, her breath caught. He was dressed plainly, no badge, no suit, just a man. Marshal Dean, she said softly. Marcus, he corrected. Off duty. She gave a weak smile. Marcus. They stood in silence for a few moments. The hum of distant engines filled the air between them. Finally, she said, I didn't think you'd come. I didn't think you'd ask, he replied. She nodded. I owed you more than an apology online. I needed to say it face to face. He said nothing, waiting. Claire took a deep breath. You showed me something I didn't expect. Restrained. Grace. I've been in this job 8 years, and somewhere along the line, I lost sight of what that meant. Every day, I deal with rude passengers, delays, anger, and I started carrying all of it with me, until I couldn't anymore. That day, you were just there, and I took it out on you. Her voice cracked. I hurt someone who didn't deserve it. Marcus studied her quietly. His eyes weren't cold, just thoughtful, deliberate. "Why are you really here, Claire?" he asked. "To own it," she said. "Not just to apologize, but to understand how to move forward. I can't change what happened, but maybe I can change because of it." He nodded slowly. "Then we agree on something." She hesitated. "You know, people think you ruined me." "I didn't ruin you," he said gently. "The internet did that. I just refused to add to the noise." She blinked back tears. "You could have destroyed me, Marcus. One word from you and I'd never work again." He looked out the window at the rising sun. "Destroying you wouldn't fix what happened. Justice isn't about punishment, it's about restoration." Claire frowned, trying to hold back emotion. "And what about you? You just walk away like nothing happened." He turned back to her, his tone firm but not unkind. "No, it happened, and it left a mark, not on my face, but on what I believe in. But that's the thing about marks. They remind us of lessons worth remembering." She stared at him, speechless. The PA system crackled faintly overhead. "Attention all passengers," but the words blurred into background noise. Claire finally said, "You know, when I first saw your badge, I thought my life was over. But now, I think maybe it was the wake-up call I needed." He smiled faintly. "Sometimes the universe sends lessons through people we least expect." She gave a small, shaky laugh. "And sometimes it slaps you across the face, apparently." He chuckled softly, the first hint of humor between them. "I guess we're even," he said. "Even. You at me. I taught you something." Claire's smile faded into something more solemn. "That doesn't feel even. That feels like grace." Marcus didn't respond right away. Then he said quietly, "Grace is rarer than justice. It's harder to give." He remembered his training days, his instructor's words echoing, "Your weapon is your last resort. Your mind is your first." He remembered missions gone wrong, people screaming, officers reacting too fast. And then, he remembered Claire's face that day, shocked, ashamed, trembling, and how 1 second of violence had changed everything. In that reflection, he saw his own mistakes from the past, the moments he'd lost his temper, the times someone else had shown him mercy. Maybe that's why he couldn't hate her, because he knew what it meant to be broken by your own actions, and to rebuild from it. Claire broke the silence. "The airline offered me retraining. They said I could come back after a psychological review. I wasn't sure if I should." "You should," Marcus said simply. She blinked. "Even after, especially after," he interrupted. "You've seen what happens when pressure wins. You'll be better because you lived through it." She nodded, a tear sliding down her cheek. "Do you ever get tired of being calm all the time?" He smiled faintly. "Every day. But that's the job. Not just as a marshal, as a man." Claire's eyes softened. "I wish I had that kind of strength." "You do," he said quietly. "You just haven't learned to trust it yet." For a moment, they just stood there, two people bound by a single mistake, yet connected through something greater. Marcus finally extended his hand. "Let's call this what it really was, a lesson. For both of us." Claire stared at his hand, then took it. Her grip was firm but trembling. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once. "Be better." "That's thanks enough." And then, without another word, he turned and walked away down the quiet terminal. Claire watched him go, her reflection beside his shrinking figure in the window, one shadow fading, another beginning. Karen Lee, the journalist, finished her article, the one that finally told the full story. The headline read, "The Slap That Taught America About Restraint, the Untold Story of Flight 762. In it, she wrote not of outrage or scandal, but of reflection, two people on opposite sides of a moment, both changed by it. When the article went live, the comments were different this time, calmer, more thoughtful. This story hit differently. He did the right thing. She owned up to it. Respect. The noise began to fade, replaced by something rare, understanding. He sat alone in his apartment, sipping coffee by the window. The city lights flickered like quiet applause outside. His phone buzzed, a text from Claire. "I'm flying again next week. Different route, new crew. Thank you for giving me the chance to start over." Marcus smiled, setting the phone aside. He whispered, "That's all the justice I needed." For a long moment, he simply watched the city move, unaware, unstoppable, endlessly human. And in that calm, he felt it, the weight lifting, the story closing. No arrests, no revenge, just balance restored. Airports never sleep. They breathe. They hum with stories of arrival and departure, of people leaving one life and stepping into another. For Marcus Dean, that terminal at JFK became more than a place of confrontation. It became a symbol, a reminder that strength, real strength, isn't about who can shout the loudest. It's about who can stay silent and still be heard. Claire walking through the terminal in her new uniform, not crisp and flawless, but honest, her eyes softer now, her steps slower. She greets passengers differently. There's no automatic smile, just genuine warmth. Marcus boarding another flight, this time as a passenger again. The hum of engines beneath his seat, the seatbelt click, the calm before takeoff. Different skies, same world, but both of them have changed. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at the Federal Air Marshal Service office. It was handwritten, rare in those halls of bureaucracy. Marcus opened it slowly. The handwriting was neat but nervous. Dear Marshal Dean, I wanted to thank you again, not for forgiving me, but for teaching me. I've started therapy, not because the company required it, but because I needed it. I've learned that being professional isn't about being perfect, it's about being human under pressure. I can't erase that moment, but I can make sure it never defines me again. Sincerely, Claire Turner. Marcus smiled faintly as he folded the letter, then he slipped it into his desk drawer, beside a small badge case and a note his late father had written him years ago. Son, real men don't fight to prove they're right, they fight to protect what's right. He looked out the window, sunlight spilling over the city skyline. It felt like the world had come full circle. That week, Horizon Air made a quiet announcement, not a press conference, not a statement of guilt, but a new policy. Emotional resilience and passenger de-escalation training, inspired by recent events aboard Flight 762. It didn't mention names. It didn't have to. The training would teach flight crews how to calm tense situations, and how to recognize when they themselves were nearing a breaking point. The initiative spread through the industry, quietly but steadily. Airlines began adopting it across the country, and all because of one slap. In the aftermath of what some have called the Flight 762 incident, both the flight attendant and the air marshal involved have become symbols, not of scandal, but of accountability. Their story is now being used in training programs nationwide as an example of restraint, forgiveness, and emotional discipline under stress. Karen paused in her recording booth, then added, quietly, off script, sometimes, the smallest act of grace can ripple farther than any punishment. He scrolled through the article, then locked his phone and closed his eyes. The sounds of the city washed over him, laughter, traffic, the distant echo of a jet overhead. He breathed deeply, letting it all sink in. He didn't want fame. He didn't want credit. But in that moment, he felt something deeper, peace. He whispered to himself, almost a prayer. Balance restored. Elsewhere, Claire finished her first full flight since the incident. As the passengers disembarked, one elderly woman paused beside her and said, "You're one of the kind ones. Thank you." Claire smiled, genuinely this time. When the last passenger left, she sat in the jump seat, exhausted but light-hearted. The intercom clicked. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York. We hope you had a pleasant flight." She closed her eyes, whispering the words Marcus once said, "Justice isn't about revenge, it's about restoring balance." And she realized that wasn't just his philosophy, it had become hers too. Months passed. The world forgot about Flight 762. The hashtags faded. The outrage moved on to something new. But for those who were there, the passengers, the crew, the officers, that day remained imprinted in memory, not as a scandal, not as a viral moment, but as a turning point, a reminder of how close we all live to losing control, and how much power there is in pulling back instead. When we talk about justice, most people picture handcuffs, courts, punishment, but sometimes justice looks like two people standing in an airport, one seeking forgiveness, the other giving it freely. That's the kind of justice that changes hearts, not headlines. And in the end, that's what Marcus believed the world needed more of, not force, not fury, but empathy. Because true power isn't the ability to dominate others, it's the courage to hold your ground without striking back. He stood up from that park bench, brushed off his jacket, and started walking. Another flight, another mission, another day to serve. But now, he carried something lighter than a badge, something invisible yet stronger than authority, a kind of quiet conviction, the belief that even in chaos, we choose who we become. And maybe that's the real lesson behind Flight 762, that sometimes, life will slap you, literally or metaphorically. It'll test your patience, your pride, your peace. But what defines you isn't the hit, it's how you rise after it. Whether you escalate, or elevate. Marcus chose to elevate, and because of that, the story didn't end in anger, it ended in understanding. Thank you for staying till the end. Stories like this take a lot of heart and time to create. If it touched you even a little, please subscribe so I can keep bringing you more stories where justice finds its way. Because sometimes, justice isn't loud, it's quiet, It's human, and it's enough.